Our next big topic that we'll discuss during this course is social engineering. Now, social engineering is very important, not only for the CEH, but also in real-life hacking, because social engineering targets the weakest link in the security chain, the people. There's all kinds of things you can do to secure your technology and your network. You can put up firewalls, you can put out border routers, you can use encryption, you can use permissions on objects. But people are the one thing that is hardest to secure. Now, social engineering takes advantage of human characteristics, and those characteristics could be weaknesses. It could also be trust, which could be a strength. Now, social engineering is non-technical, and it uses non-technical methods to gather information or circumvent security controls in an organization. And we're going to talk about that for the next several segments. So let's talk about what social engineering is. We know that it targets people in non-technical processes. And the reason I say non-technical processes is that it really doesn't target things like firewalls, networks, routers, and so forth, or encryption. It could use non-technical methods and processes to get information or to gain access into an organization. It also may target weak physical and operational security. Maybe there's flaws in the guard rotation schedules that could be used to gain access to a facility. Social engineering might help you find that out and target those weaknesses. Now, social engineering can use some technical tools, but usually this is incidental because the target still is a person or an operation. So tools that you might see in social engineering are email or phishing websites or something like that. But there's several different methods and techniques available to social engineers, and typically you are flexible in what you do because it depends upon the person you're trying to engineer or the organization and how it's set up. So there are several different methods you could use as long as you're flexible. Now, the goals of social engineering are typically to gather information from people, to gain a foothold into the organization, and ultimately to infiltrate security. Now, even if you have a person get you into the building, or if that person just simply gives you passwords to systems, either way you're infiltrating the security of that organization. Now, from a hacker perspective, social engineering is not always as easy as it seems, and some hackers really don't have what it takes to be good social engineers. Some do. Social engineering requires patience, the ability to think quickly on your feet, some acting ability, obviously, the ability to, unfortunately, lie with a straight face. Sometimes you have to be very resourceful, and you have to have good observation skills. And I will tell you that unlike a lot of jobs, people skills are a must. You must have good people skills, the ability to talk to people, to get along with them, to manipulate them, if you will. Those things are necessary in social engineering. Now let's look at some attack vectors before we move on and talk about the particulars of social engineering attacks. Some of the things we may attack using social engineering techniques are people, obviously, and those could be network administrators, security personnel, senior executives, for example. They could also be janitors or maintenance people. We may use techniques like blackmail. Sometimes that has been successfully used on people who have something to hide. We also may use email or social media as an access point into people. Some of the social engineering attacks that you could wage include phishing, which obviously is getting someone to visit a false website, vishing, which is a term that's applied to voice over IP phishing. You also might have a couple of variants called whaling and spear phishing, where these techniques actually target specific people within the organization. Some of the things you could do in social engineering includes casual contact with people, just kind of saying hi and striking up a conversation and attempting to get information that way. You can also use eavesdropping and surveillance, watching people, taking pictures of an organization, or filming the people leaving and entering an organization. You might use techniques like shoulder surfing, dumpster diving, and even impersonation to get into contact with people and to get yourself into the organization and to gather information about the organization and your target. So we're going to talk about a lot of these things in depth over the next several segments, and hopefully when we're done you'll see that social engineering sometimes is not as easy as it appears, and it can give you a lot more information than you thought, and it requires the same kind of skill and finesse that technical attacks require. So let's go ahead and jump into social engineering. In this segment, we'll talk about an important part of social engineering, and those are the targets that you can try to access and contact to get information about the organization. Now, social engineering targets can include any person in the food chain in the organization, and this could be even the CEO all the way down to the janitor. Even the janitor can have valuable information that you could use. Every target, in fact, has something of value to offer the hacker. This could be information. It might be access to secure areas like the server room. Heck, even gossip could be helpful because you might hear things that aren't necessarily written down on paper or transmitted over the network about people, and you can use that information. Even if a target does not have any useful information for you or can't get you into anything, maybe they have the ability to introduce you to another target that is considered valuable, and that in itself is a good thing. Now, depending upon several things, whether the person you're targeting is an executive or a help desk person or a janitor and so forth, it may require a different approach. It also may require a different approach if the contact that you have with the target is of a casual nature, like meeting them on a ball field during a game, or a social nature, like meeting them in a bar, or even a professional context, like posing as a salesman and talking to them. So all of these different contexts may have different approaches that you would have to master and be able to use against a target. Now, speaking of targets, let's talk about some of the particular targets that we might be looking at in an organization. These are typically the targets you want, the ones here listed on the screen. Executives are good targets, and this includes the CEO and all the C-level positions, the CIO, the CISO, and so forth, because they have valuable strategic information about an organization. They have the keys to the kingdom, if you will, and most importantly, they may have power that can be used and leveraged and manipulated to gain access to an organization. Now, maybe you might manipulate that power by blackmailing them, or you might manipulate that power by being friends with them and getting them to do your favors and so forth. Technical personnel also have the keys to the kingdom, but it's on a different level. They may have passwords, network architecture details, network configuration details that you can glean from them. Even if you just get a little bit of information about the infrastructure, that's helpful. But you may even get access to things like passwords. They also may have security information, like the firewall configuration, for example, that may tell you how to access the network, how to get through their defenses and get to the network infrastructure. Now, security personnel obviously have the security information about the organization, and that could include the technical information, but it also probably includes physical information like physical security, organizational policies and procedures. They could even have access codes to secure areas like the server room. They may know the alarm details and be familiar with the guard schedule and so forth. They also may know the contingency plans and incident response procedures, and this would help you defend yourself in the event an attack fails or doesn't go well. Administrative personnel, I'm talking executive assistants and secretaries and so forth, they are very valuable people. In fact, they can be some of the most valuable people you talk to because they typically know everything that's going on in an organization. They know the official stuff and the unofficial stuff. If you can talk to an executive assistant that works for a CEO, for example, they usually know the typical whereabouts and habits of most of their bosses and other employees in their area, so they can actually give you a lot of cool information. Now, facilities personnel, obviously, they know a lot of things about the facilities. They know the layout. They may know the physical security details, such as where all the closed-circuit TVs are, what the guard schedule is, and so forth. They also may be aware of any issues with the facility, like alarms that don't work or doors that don't work properly. And they can tell you about new facility additions that you might need to know about in order to get into that facility, to take advantage of. There are also external personnel, such as contractors that may visit the facility, construction personnel that are helping on with an addition to the building or something like that, janitorial staff, obviously, delivery personnel, vendors. All these people have information they can give you and could even get you access to certain areas. Now, some of the things that a hacker might use, and these are things that I've used in penetration tests before, in addition to the different types of employees like executives, technical personnel, you're also looking for personnel that have quirks or have issues, because those people can actually be easily manipulated into giving you information. These might be disgruntled employees who aren't getting paid enough or got passed over for promotion. Maybe they've got a lot of bad things to say about the organization. Some of these employees can be blackmailed if you pay attention to their social media, intercept emails, and so forth. They may be doing something they don't want anyone to know about. They may not want their wives, for example, to know about their girlfriends. So they might be easily susceptible to suggestion based upon that. Gossipy administrative assistants are always helpful. They can give you some cool information about people that you won't find officially. System administrators that are overworked, underpaid, always like to vent and talk about their troubles in bars. Security personnel are also frequently arrogant. They have egos. And if you can stroke that ego and pump them up a little bit, they will give you information also. You also might take advantage of the relationships that blue-collar workers have versus white-collar relationships. Some of the blue-collar folks don't like the executives and talk about how bad they are, or talk about things that the organization does that may be useful from a hacking perspective. And there are other types of targets you might look at too. Elderly employees always like to be helped, and they like to talk sometimes. Sometimes other employees like to help you out a lot. Employees with unusual hobbies, if you get them talking about those hobbies, they can be easily susceptible to getting information about. So there's all kinds of employees and different situations that could give you information about an organization and what's going on there. So take advantage of these things, and you have to really be kind of a social person and have people skills to take advantage of some of these things. Now let's take a look at the methods that a social engineer would use in general to attack people or physical and operational security. The methods that a social engineer might use cover a wide gamut, and this involves selecting a target, establishing a contact with that target, developing a relationship of sorts, and getting what they want, information or actions. Now, contacts with a human target can be short or long term, because the goal may be something very easy to get or just a small piece of information, or it might be a long-term target that involves getting a lot of information or cooperation from the target over time. Now, a social engineer uses information that they gather about a target against an organization and its personnel. This could be personal information, it could be organizational information, network information, and so forth. Now, the methods that we'll talk about over the next couple of sessions involve gathering information about a target, and this could come from a wide variety of sources: social media, email, listening to conversations, surveillance, and so forth. Then the attacker may establish some sort of common ground to initiate that contact, if you will. And this may be common hobbies or things that they're both interested in, or being at a common place like a ball game or a bar. And eventually, a positive or negative relationship is established with the target. Now, a positive relationship could be a friendship or companionship or even an intimate relationship. A negative relationship might mean something like blackmail or bribery. In any case, you might build trust with the target, or in the case of a negative relationship, you might even build fear with the target. After that's established, you would exploit that relationship and get what you want. And the target would get what they want, even if they don't know they're getting it. It could be that friendship, that companionship, that intimate relationship, or it could be consequences like, again, blackmail or extortion. They also could be getting money from a malicious hacker to do what you want them to do. Now, some of the methods that a hacker may use are listed here, and these are in no certain order, and we'll talk a little bit more about these as we go through, because we're going to talk about how social engineers attack humans, the human target, how they attack humans using technology like computers and mobile devices, and how they may attack physical and operational security using social engineering techniques. So these are some of the methods that are out there that an attacker may use. You may find them impersonating a user, like an ordinary user calling the help desk, for example, asking to have their password reset and pretending to be very ignorant of how computers and networks work. You also may see them impersonating an administrator, maybe a help desk person who calls a user and says, "Hey, I need to reset your password. Give me the old one so I can do that." And a user, not knowing any better, may do that. You also may find that an attacker may impersonate an executive or a very important person, a VIP, and use authority or threat of authority toward someone like a user or help desk person. Like, "You better reset my password right now or you're fired." Something like that. Another thing that an attacker might do is pretend that they're supposed to be there, like a maintenance person or a janitor, Sometimes you'll just see these people around and you take it for granted that they're supposed to be there. It might be a delivery person dressed in a delivery outfit or something like that, and you just assume that since they're there, they're supposed to be there. A lot of people won't question those kinds of people. A hacker also may use fear or intimidation tactics to get what they want out of a person. They may scare a person by threats or intimidation, like they may threaten to reveal information, embarrassing information about an employee that their employer would not look favorably upon. Another technique that's not necessarily negative is an attacker that may seem to need help or assistance. They may be playing the poor person who has had some bad luck and they need you to help them. And a lot of us, out of the goodness of our hearts, will do so. And that's how they establish that initial contact and get that relationship going. Attackers can use all kinds of techniques that we'll discuss over the next couple of sessions. They may use phone or email or websites or computers. Okay? They also may look at techniques that involve establishing a common history or interest with a person so they can initiate that contact and cultivate that relationship. Some of this involves doing their research and learning private information about an individual that other people wouldn't necessarily know. Maybe hobbies, maybe relationships, maybe past histories, and so forth. Maybe likes and dislikes. You could get that information off social media, for example, or listening in on conversations, or spying on a person and looking at their habits. A lot of this stuff that we talk about with social engineering is not always positive. It could be negative, like using blackmail against an executive or against an IT administrator, or extorting them to do something, maybe threatening them. So those things are the negative sides of social engineering. Other things you may see are more physical or not as in-depth. Might be shoulder surfing, where you might walk by and see someone typing in a password or other information. There might be passive surveillance involved, like taking pictures, following a user, or taking video of them. And of course, there's the ever-popular dumpster diving that we'll discuss, where an attacker will get themselves dirty and dive on into the dumpster to get printed information out that other people have thrown away, not really knowing any better. So there's all kinds of methods that a social engineer can use. And again, these aren't in any certain order, and we're going to go through some of these as we talk about these next topics in the next few sessions. Now let's take a look at human social engineering attacks. And these are attacks that you would use as a malicious hacker to establish a relationship with a human target and get information out of them. Human-based social engineering attacks usually involve direct, prolonged, and planned contact with people who have something the attacker wants. That might be sensitive information. It might be access to a system or an area that otherwise the attacker might not be able to get into. Maybe they're going to fool the person into letting them into a sensitive area with their access badge, or maybe they're going to steal that badge. You could also use a target for helping you to carry out the attack if you're a hacker. Maybe you have the unsuspecting victim insert a USB stick or a disk into a system that has malware on them. Maybe you can trick them into doing that. Or maybe you might use bribery extortion to get them to do something to complete an action on the inside that would give you access. In any case, all these methods that we talk about vary with the type of target you're after, the level of information they have or access they have, maybe the type of contact you want with them, whether it be casual or in-depth, and the depth of effort that you need to achieve your goals, whatever they are. Now, some of these methods that we discuss involve positive relationships with the target, like friendship and companionship, and some of these relationships involve negative ones, and this could be like blackmail, extortion, threats, and so forth. Hackers are not above doing these things to get what they want if they really want their goals met. Now, the typical model for human social engineering attacks, whether it's positive or negative, kind of follows a process, if you will. First of all, you may gather information about the target. And what you want to know is their habits, their history as much as you can. Not just things that everyone knows, but things that very few people know. Things that you might could use against them or leverage against them to get that contact and maintain it. Their hobbies, things they're interested in, people they know, relationships that they have, things of that nature. And what you would want to do is basically collect a database of them and memorize all that before you initiate the contact. And depending upon the context that you're using, you may initiate that contact accidentally or on purpose. You may contact them and say, hey, we're members of the same club, or hey, your kid plays ball with my kid, something like that, something very innocuous. In any case, you would initiate that contact and then develop that relationship. And as relationships develop between human beings, trust is established, okay? Friendships are established. Now, once that relationship is developed, you want to establish trust. And this is in the case of a positive relationship. In fact, this is where it kind of divides a little bit. If it's a positive relationship, you'll establish trust or friendship or companionship. You'll get them to like you for whatever reasons that you give them, that common history, common background, common interests. In the case of the negative relationship, you might establish fear or some other negative emotion. You may spring on them that you know about their past criminal history and their employer doesn't know it, and if you don't give me what I want, then I'll tell the employer what I know, or something like that, or I'll tell your wife you have a girlfriend, something of that nature. So at this point, the relationship can go either positive or negative. And once you establish that trust or that fear type of emotional relationship with the target, then you might exploit it. You would exploit their trust by getting them to do something and convincing them that it's in their best interest or your best interest or even the company's best interest to do it. You might exploit that fear by starting the process of blackmail or extortion and telling them what you want. I want you to deliver me the administrative password, or you will go into your company and install this software on the network. It might be something of that nature. And if they don't do it, then you're going to have them face the consequences. Now, once they do what you want, you obtain your goal. You get the information you want, or you get access to an area or to a system, or you have them perform the action you want, then you could reward them. That could be money, it could be continued friendship, it could be something that they value. And in a lot of these cases, they're not even going to know that you're doing this with them. Now, in the case of the consequences, if they fail to do what you want them to do, you might give them the consequences by sending a photograph of their girlfriend to their wife, or making an anonymous phone call to the security person at their company and letting them know about their criminal behavior. Something like that. Either way, you would hand out that reward or consequences. Now, if you think you're going to be using this target again for additional work later, you might maintain that relationship. You might give them rewards or gifts or cash or something like that. You might also, in the negative sense, tell them, okay, now you've done what I want, and I won't tell your employer this month, or I won't send this picture to your wife. But you're going to have to be good and give me more of what I want later, more information. So you might maintain and cultivate that relationship, whether it's positive or negative. Some examples of human social engineering attacks that we talked about: blackmail, obviously, bribery, giving them money. This will work on network administrators who don't get paid what they should, and maybe they need the money, maybe they live beyond their means. Threats, whether it's physical threats or not, sometimes work, but that's an extreme case when a hacker does that. Extortion, obviously, fear and things like that. You might also appeal to an ego for a highly egotistical system administrator or security person. You might promise someone intimacy, that kind of relationship, or friendship or companionship. You also may associate problems that they have and give them assistance with them. Or you could pretend that you need assistance and rely on their goodwill. In any case, you're using deception at various points and manipulation. You're manipulating people and deceiving them. And these are just examples of human social engineering attacks. Continuing our discussion on social engineering, let's talk about technology-based attacks. Now, early on we said that most social engineering attacks were low tech or didn't involve any tech. And that's still the truth. It's not like we're hacking into a system using some advanced programming skills or exploits. However, there are ways you can use social engineering through technology. And these are still low-tech attacks. They might involve telephones, websites, and so forth. So it really doesn't require a lot of high tech to get some of these social engineering attacks to happen. So let's take a look at some of these. Some of these social engineering attacks use technology that's pervasive in everyone's life in order to target people and their weaknesses and weak security measures, weak operational or physical security measures. Now, obviously, the goal in technology-based social engineering is to get personal information about an individual or even about an organization, things that you could use against them or things that you could use to steal money from them. We think of bank fraud and so forth when we look at that. We also may have a goal as a hacker of identity theft, getting enough pieces of information about them to create an identity that belongs to them and stealing it from them. In other words, getting licenses or other identification that could be used to obtain credit cards, loans, and so forth. So identity theft is a big consequence sometimes of technology-based social engineering. Another thing you might want out of technology-based social engineering would be execution of malware on systems, kind of social engineering the person to execute a virus or a Trojan on a system so that it could steal data from the system or complete some undesirable actions. Another thing might be password and credential theft, stealing their passwords or user credentials to their banking website, to their system, to whatever. So these are just some of the goals that you might have using technology when you social engineer people. Users can typically be tricked into giving up information about themselves or even doing things on the system, executing programs and so forth, based upon emails and websites that are false but look totally real. They're totally authentic looking. And a lot of hackers will go through a lot of trouble to create fake websites and fake emails that might mimic banking sites, for example, or credit card sites or something like that. So you might get an email from a banking institution or what looks like a banking institution that's telling you that your account's been compromised and you need to go ahead and reset your credentials. And then it would give you a link that you could use to go to that site and reset your credentials. And obviously what's going to happen is you're going to click that link and go to a site that looks remarkably like your bank site and log in thinking you're changing your credentials, and it probably would allow you to change them. But what's really happening is you're putting in your old password and it's collecting that. And then the hacker would go to your bank site and put in your credentials and steal your money. Okay, it happens all the time. One thing that helps a hacker is that sometimes these technologies can be used in combination with each other. And this would lend credibility to the attack and add depth to it. So in addition to getting an email, you also might get a follow-up phone call from someone claiming to be the bank manager, and they might direct you to the same fake bank site. So sometimes you'll get more than one avenue of attack from a hacker in order to convince you that this is a real type of thing instead of a fake thing. They might use computers, mobile phones, voice over IP. There have even been cases of thieves using fake ATMs where people would come up to the ATM, put in their ATM PIN and card, and then the ATM doesn't give the card back and says it's out of money and it's broken and gives the user a false phone number to call. And then the thieves later come and open up the ATM and get the PIN and the card. Another thing you might see are false login screens, and usually this is a result of a virus or malware on the system that the user has executed. Some other techniques that we see that are related to technology include phishing, vishing, spear phishing, and whaling. Now, phishing, obviously, most of us have heard about that. It's where you get the email, it directs you to a fake website, you put in your credentials. Okay, that's basic phishing. Vishing is a variant that uses voice over IP, because voice over IP basically uses a network, and you can execute certain attacks against it that are very similar. You can get false voicemails that tell you to do things, or your voice over IP may get redirected to a different number that you didn't expect, and another person may pick it up. Spear phishing is where users from a particular organization are targeted specifically, and it may be like everyone in a particular company is targeted based upon information the attacker has about the company, knowing that they frequently go to a certain website from the company, or that the users may frequently get emails from certain people. So spear phishing would target specific companies and groups of people in those companies. Whaling, on the other hand, might be targeted toward specific people within a company, like senior executives only, or network administrators, or security people. So they're all variants of phishing in some way or another. And obviously, hackers can also use malware and get users to execute that. Trojans, viruses, fake apps on their mobile devices are even out there as well. And these are just some of the attacks in no particular order that a hacker could use and execute against people using technology. We've talked about several of these already. Cell phone hacking and social media, voice over IP, email, websites, fake pop-ups, that's really big. False virus warnings and false antivirus that you would click on to get rid of the false virus on your computer that really gives you a virus. Things like that, SMS messages, all kinds of things, identity theft and forgery. These are all technology-based social engineering attacks that attackers do use every day. One more aspect of social engineering that I'd like to talk about, and that's the physical aspect. The not necessarily technological types of social engineering and not necessarily prolonged human contact. These are things that happen peripherally. Obviously, dumpster diving, like we see in the picture there, is one of those things. Physical social engineering attacks basically are indirect, and what they want is to gain information through means other than direct or prolonged contact with people. That may involve peripheral contact or very short-term contact with individuals, just to get a little piece of information out of them or to get into somewhere. Now, physical attacks usually involve stealing or gathering information through non-technical means. And again, we're talking dumpster diving, maybe shoulder surfing, or some kind of surveillance. One thing about these non-technical attacks is hackers frequently get other people to execute them. Sometimes people do this unknowingly, like a hacker will hire some person to go through a dumpster and grab all the information that a company has thrown away and bring it to them. And the person may not know why, they just know that they're getting paid a few bucks to do it. Things of that nature. They may take advantage of poor operational or physical security around an organization, poor operational practices, poor physical security, and so forth. Now let's talk about these physical social engineering attacks a bit more. Most of these physical attacks involve very limited or non-contact situations. The goal is to do this with as little contact as human beings as possible, only when you need to. It's not a real involved, in-depth social engineering attack that requires a lot of planning, information gathering, context, and so forth. The goal is to get information indirectly from an organization based upon the human security deficiencies like throwing documentation away in the dumpster that you shouldn't, or other operational and physical security lapses. Now, one thing a hacker may do is create situations that cause people to have to do things so they can take advantage of a situation. And often causing mayhem or confusion is one of the things that a hacker may rely on. So they may create emergencies, false emergencies, or other distractions to gauge an organization's or a person's response, or get them to do things like get them to evacuate a building, for example, so they can slip in and commit some kind of crime, theft, or access a system. It may involve surveillance or recording conversations between people. Hackers also steal devices or physical objects, maybe badges so they can reproduce them or use them, uniforms, name tags to put on their shirt, for example, to appear to be someone else, to impersonate someone. They also may steal wallets or purses to get identification out of, or as a distraction of a person to get them to do something different while they do something else. A hacker also may steal or acquire physical information. And when I say physical information, I'm talking about information that's not on a disk or a USB stick or on a computer. I'm talking printed materials, photographs, things of that nature. Now, some examples of some physical social engineering attacks. Some of these we've mentioned and some of these we haven't. Dumpster diving, obviously, organizations throw stuff away they should not throw away. Phone books, network diagrams, user manuals for new systems. Sometimes they'll throw those away and you can guess what they've just bought. A lot of hackers will actually steal mail. They'll intercept it and steal it so they can get information about a person or an organization. And obviously this violates federal law, so this is serious. If they stoop to this level, they're a serious attacker. They're going to get their goal no matter what the cost is. Copying printed documents when they get a chance. They may swipe them off a secretary's desk and copy them quickly and put them back if they get the opportunity. Piggybacking or tailgating. That's a frequent physical social engineering attack because they tailgate behind someone or they pretend to have a lot of boxes in their hands and pretend that they can't get in the door. So someone very nicely opens the door and lets them in. As I mentioned before, creating an emergency situation like a fire alarm, for example. If you pull the fire alarm, people are going to evacuate. And frequently in that type of situation, security is secondary. Doors are left open so people can evacuate. So an attacker can slip right in without worrying about triggering an alarm. A bomb threat, for example, also might create an emergency situation where people have to evacuate the premises for a long period of time. That would give the attacker time to do some things that maybe no one's there to watch, like break into a system, for example. Attackers could also cause non-innocuous situations like a car accident, maybe bumping into a car in a parking lot, causing a person to have to get out and get their insurance paperwork out, call the police, and do a report. They may create low-level distractions like stealing a purse or causing someone to lose their wallet or something like that. They may use fake badges and uniforms to get into a place so they can get physical access. They also may steal phones, tablets, or laptops, A, hoping to get information off of them, but B, just so that the person won't have them. That could be denying them information that they need to do their job. You also may see people in your parking lot taking pictures and video. That's discreet surveillance. Hopefully, if it's discreet enough for the hacker, they won't get caught. Eavesdropping. This could be as simple as listening in on a conversation at a restaurant, or it could even mean using these little hidden cameras or microphones that we see these days in ink pens and eyeglasses. Also could mean shoulder surfing, walking behind someone in an internet cafe or as they're using their laptop in a coffee shop, for example. A lot of attackers will also pull the old trick of dropping a USB stick or a disk in a company's parking lot. People find it, pick it up, take it inside, and obviously they naturally stick it in their computer to see what it has on it, and it has malware on it, something the user doesn't see or detect until it's too late. So all of these physical social engineering attacks can be used to get information and get people to do what they want them to do. And they're part of the whole social engineering methodology we've talked about up until this point. So, how do we prevent these social engineering attacks, or at least mitigate the damage they can do to our organization and our people? Well, it's quite easy. You just simply securely configure and patch your people, right? Obviously, we know that's not the answer. We can patch and configure hardware and systems, but we really can't patch people. There is no patch for being a human being. So what can you do? Well, you can educate and train your people. As a matter of fact, education and training is really the primary means of patching people. It's the thing you really need to do in order to lower the risk of social engineering in your organization. What you do is you educate people on social engineering techniques, how it works, what the ramifications can be, and tell them how to avoid social engineering attacks and prevent them. You need to brief your people on what actually is and what isn't sensitive information in the company, because they may not know. Obviously, things like phone numbers and sensitive company information about the organization could be information you don't want out there in the world. And some things might not be sensitive information. Decide as an organization what is and isn't, and then put that policy out and brief people on what they should and shouldn't talk about openly with unknown people. Set policies on education and training for your employees on social engineering and other topics. Basically say that everyone will get trained when they become a new employee and periodically thereafter, as refresher, if you will, because people will forget, and if you reinforce the training, they will remember. Obviously, all of your personnel should be vigilant, observant, and, whenever it's necessary, suspicious. This could be suspicious of other people's actions, suspicious of events that don't look normal or don't seem normal, observant of things going on around them in their environment. The same car that drives around the parking lot repeatedly, stopping every now and then to take a picture. That's something your employees ought to observe and do something about. The organization should also develop procedures for the secure disposal of any printed information that could be sensitive. Things like phone books, for example, company directories, even possibly configuration manuals for the system software that the company uses. Also, you should develop a disposal policy for sensitive media, things like flash drives, USB sticks, even hard drives. You don't just throw those away, obviously, because they could have data remnants on them. So develop a disposal policy for those media. Obviously, from a physical security standpoint, you'd want to secure and control any badges or any other kinds of identification that are used by organizational personnel. This includes uniforms as well. If any of them become lost or get stolen, you definitely want to report that to the security personnel because others could use those pieces of identification or uniforms to get access to the company. Definitely control visitors and verify their reasons for being in any areas. Obviously, a lobby where people would come in to wait on people might not be one of those areas, but if people go past the receptionist desk, for example, or if you find a strange person wandering around in what could be a sensitive area without an escort, you should verify their reason for being there and find their escort. All visitors should be logged into the organization, escorted, and controlled. Those are some of the things you should do from a general perspective, but there's a lot more things. Practice good operations security. Make people adhere to the procedures that are out there. Sometimes carelessness or sloppiness or forgetfulness can actually be a huge security breach. Propping a door open so you can go outside and smoke in the smoking area, for example, that's a security breach. Holding the door open for an unknown person bringing in a lot of boxes, that could be a security breach. You should check their identity first, obviously. Shredding sensitive documents. Obviously, don't throw them away in the dumpster. Be aware of which information is sensitive in the company and, again, which isn't. Be aware of people who seek too much information, whether it be at the company or in a social setting, a bar downtown, a basketball game, whatever. Be suspicious of loiterers, anyone who's hanging around in areas where they normally shouldn't be. Your employees should also question unknown persons. If they don't know who the person is, it's okay to ask what they're doing there in a friendly manner and help direct them to the person they need, or go get that person to come and escort them. Obviously, employees should be briefed that they should report suspicious activities, unknown packages, people coming in with deliveries that aren't expected, maintenance personnel coming in where there is no scheduled maintenance, those sorts of things. They should obviously double-check people's stories. Social engineers are very good at what they do, and they can set up very convincing pretexts for getting into an organization and doing things. So tell your employees to go ahead and check. It's okay. Everyone should be vigilant and secure. If someone comes in and says they have a delivery, or if someone comes in and says they're authorized to perform maintenance, double check it. Obviously, secure electronic devices, because if there are unescorted people in the building or area, those devices could be stolen or accessed. Obviously, you wouldn't allow tailgaters. Brief your employees to make sure that everyone badges in and that everyone belongs inside the facility. And one more thing, watch for eavesdroppers. Don't discuss sensitive information in an open area like a break room or a bar, for example. Sensitive information should be only discussed in those areas designated for such. If an employee does all of these things, social engineering attacks can be reduced and mitigated. Obviously, humans are going to be humans, so you probably can't completely eliminate social engineering attacks, but you can thwart a hacker and minimize the damage they can do with social engineering. And all it takes is educating and training your people.